So this is the beginning of the integumentary system conditions. So just a brief uh, look at defining some terms, a review of the anatomy and physiology of skin to start us out. We'll be doing this for the next few weeks. So skin keeps your insides in and your outsides out. It it is hugely important for that. That's what most people see it as. Um, but it also has this whole protection thing. It's that first line of defense. It keeps the pathogens out of our body. Uh, it discourages, there's secretions in the skin that discourage things from growing on the skin. There's acidic conditions, things like that, sebum that keeps skin supple and that kind of thing. And it basically is that first line of defense. Homeostasis is an important thing. It helps manage fluid loss. Uh, it's involved with temperature regulation. It's about maintaining a constant internal environment. One of the big things is there's huge amounts of blood vessels in the skin, way more than what's needed for the nutritional requirements of skin. The whole point of skin is, or one of the points of skin, is by bringing blood to the surface, you can radiate heat. By stopping the blood flow to the skin, you can conserve heat to the core temperature. So it's really an important thing like that about that. Most people tend to forget that we have sensors all over our skin. This is the sense of touch. There's more in some areas than in others. The 2-point discrimination on your fingertip is much more finely defined than on the small of your back. But this is huge. There's also absorption and excretion happen through the skin. And sit next to somebody who's been eating a lot of garlic, and you know that there's excretion happening there. We'll even excrete alcohol to a certain extent. We also can absorb through the skin. Anything that's fat soluble can come through the skin. That's why, like the Nicoderm patches or the birth control patches or transdermal patches for a lot of different drugs can happen. They say that you can actually gain weight by doing dishes. That fats in dishwater can absorb through the skin. And so there's a certain amount of absorption. The yeah. As you know, the skin varies in thickness. There's 3 layers of skin. There's the epidermis, the dermis, and the hypodermis, right? Which looks like this. And the epidermis really is the stratum basale, the stratum spinosa, the stratum granulosa, the stratum lucidium, and the stratum keratinosa from the bottom up. By the time we get to the stratified keratinocytes, they're in the stratum corneum, that they're pretty much dead cells. The dermis is a connective tissue layer that supports the epidermis, and the hypodermis is below that. And the pathologies of these layers can vary, but it's all considered skin disease. The other things like hair and nails, sweat glands, sebaceous glands, nerve endings, all of this stuff is in the skin, and can all have potential problems. So here's a few words that you probably know, but we've got to make sure that we have the definitions down pat. So a laceration is some sort of a rip or a tear in the skin. So a laceration might be, if you catch your arm and rub it against something sharp and it lifts a flap of skin, that would be a laceration. Um, an incision is a cut. Usually, we save the term incision for like a surgical cut, a cut that's done on purpose. Um, uh, an excoriation is scratches. So that's, yeah, just scratches. Fissures are some sort of crack. Generally speaking, we get fissures when the skin is too dry and it cracks. Um, and these can be real portals of infection uh, because the skin at the site of a fissure usually is not doesn't have the secretions that it needs for protection. Papules are firm raised bumps. They're like pimples. A pimple would be a papule. Uh, as opposed to a vesicle, which is not firm. It's a fluid filled. It's like a blister. Uh, uh, so papules and vesicles kind of go together. A pustule is like a vesicle that's filled with pus. So whitehead pimples would be pustules. You know, so sometimes pustules can be quite large, and it's really what they're filling up with is pus, and pus is cellular debris, white blood cells, dead pathogens, things like that. A puncture is a hole. It's a hole that's been poked through. A puncture is exactly what it sounds like. Kind of really any kind of a hole. An avulsion is when something gets ripped off. Like you avulse, like your ear might get ripped off. That would be an avulsion. So that kind of an injury. Sometimes any digit can get ripped off. Like a finger can become avulsed. Uh, that's those are the particularly nasty ones, I guess. An abrasion is a scrape, like a road rash or a rug burn, or like you slide into second base, you might get an abrasion. A raspberry, sometimes they're called. Um, ulcers are can start as any one of these things, but it's some sort of a sore, a lesion with dead tissue that doesn't heal in the center of it. So an ulcer just doesn't heal in the center, and the tissue in the center of it is dead. Now, ideally, healing of a skin injury is would be to replace the whatever's been damaged with similar tissue. So it's nice when if there's an epithelium that's been damaged that it gets replaced with epithelial cells of the same variety. Usually in the dermis, because the dermis is mostly extracellular, it's the matrix of the connective tissue. It gets replaced with scar tissue, and scar tissue is really collagen. So what happens is that after you've been injured, you get inflammation, and then the scab forms, and then what you want is the epithelial cells from the basal cells to fill in across the wound, and then to build up until it it turns into stratum corneum, and the scab will fall off. Um, if you get into the dermis, you'll end up with fibroblasts in there and granulation tissue. And then the granulation tissue, the fibroblasts start laying down collagen fibers, and that's called a scar. Sometimes you can scar underneath the epidermis. The epidermis can be regenerated, but there's scarring underneath. That's what stretch marks are about. Sometimes if the wound is too big, then the epidermis doesn't grow over, or at least not properly, and the scar comes all the way to the surface. So there's various types of scars. There's hypertrophic scars where you get bulges at the boundary of the original injury. So that's like this little kind of raised area. You probably all have little scars like that, things that aren't just quite right. Or they can turn into these things called keloid scars, which is there's a huge mass of collagen can get deposited. That's an example of a keloid scar. I'm going to guess that the person is probably regretting that they had their ear pierced, or whatever caused that. Oftentimes you'll see keloids, and you're going to see them on your clients, maybe after surgical things. For some reason, we tend to see keloids in darker skinned people more often than in really light skinned people. And it's probably got to do with the thickness of the dermis and the type of fibroblasts that they have. If you get, like, they're basically, scars are cosmetic issues. So there's all kinds of ways that people deal with them. They laser them, they inject them with collagen, they burn them off, they have them cut off, all kinds of different things. The liquid nitrogen, that kind of thing. Don't worry about scar tissue. It doesn't affect your massage, and it actually might improve the quality if the scar is new. It can help organize the scar.